we've heard Carlos Mendoza say that's the most surprising thing from him as a manager. He's like, how are they all struggling at the same time? But now let's talk about Carlos Mendoza. JJ, do you think he's kind of to blame with this slump, or is it just the players not living up to how they should be playing?
Yeah, to me, this is entirely on the players. And I think when it comes to managers and not getting the most out of their team, you have to evaluate the situation. You have to look at what's going right and what's going wrong. Well, let's evaluate what's going wrong for the Mets. They can't have starters consistently flame out the way they're flaming out in these games. That, to me, is not a managerial problem. That, to me, is a staff problem. That is on the starting rotation. Then we look at the struggles of some of your best players. Francisco Lindor is basically the de facto captain of the team. He had every big hit imaginable in 2024. Hasn't been as productive. Hasn't been as good. Juan Soto, for as brilliant as his June might have been, I know the numbers as a whole are still pretty darn good. Has Juan Soto been as good as he was last year for the New York Yankees? No. He hasn't had as many big hits as he had for the Yankees in 2024. So, when I evaluate all of this, I say, okay, how much of this is falling on the manager? And to me, it's not a whole lot. And I think because of the fact that Carlos Mendoza earned so much goodwill with the way he kept the Mets together last year, the way they dug themselves out of 11 games under 500, I could look at certain managers and say they're in trouble and their performance should be under the microscope. I don't feel the same way with Carlos Mendoza. Now, again, Mets missed the playoffs. Everybody is going to be, dare I say, under the gun a little bit. That's how it works in New York City. That's just par for the course. You don't like it, go manage somewhere else. But I think this is far more about the totality of the things going wrong, not like a lack of accountability issue or guys making boneheaded mistakes, although we did see a few of those yesterday on Sunday. To me, far more about the sums it apart, not necessarily the guy at the head of the snake.
Yeah, Pat, he just said if they don't make the playoffs, could be under the gun a little bit. Do you think, fans are starting to be turning on Mendoza a little bit. I think that's just what happens when you lose games. But do you think if the Mets miss the playoffs, he's in the hot seat?
No, I don't think so. I think that Carlos he's such a tremendous manager, and I'm with JJ. I just don't think that this is on him. Now, of course, he is the manager, so he's going to be the guy that people look to when things aren't going right. But being around Carlos Mendoza every day, this is such a smart baseball guy. He's a tremendous person. He cares. He gets his players. He gets the city. And there needs to be consistency with this franchise. The Mets just haven't had a manager stick around since Terry Collins that has been able to right the ship and get things done. I think even if the Mets miss the playoffs, and this is a colossal collapse, I don't think Mendy's job is in jeopardy. I just think he's too good of a manager. I think David recognizes that. I think Steve and the ownership recognize that. I just think he means too much to this organization to even consider that. Now, of course, if the Mets miss the playoffs, there are going to be questions that need to be answered. And could there be changes to the coaching staff? Yeah, there's always potential for changes to the coaching staff. But at the end of the day, this roster is not a work in progress. It's a roster that was assembled to win. And if guys aren't producing, it comes down to that. So, no, I don't think that Carlos's job is at risk if the Mets miss the playoffs. I don't think the Mets will miss the playoffs, and I don't think this is even going to be a conversation. But either way, I don't think he's in jeopardy.
Yeah, it's not like he's making bad decisions. It's literally no one can pitch into the fifth inning and no one can hit the ball. But let's talk about the pitching. JJ keeps bringing it up. As we know, they can't get length from their starting pitcher in this series against the Brewers. No one threw for more than 4 1/3 innings, which is just, I feel unacceptable when you have these good arms. The pitching lab last year was credited so much success. This year, early season success. JJ, I know you've been wanting to talk about this. Why can't they figure out a way to get more innings from their starters?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nikki. And look, I think you have to applaud David Stearns and you have to applaud the Mets with Jeremy Hefner for the way they got Shomanaya last year to pitch at his very best. Griffin Canning early in the year was productive. Clay Holmes being able to make that transition to being a starter had a couple of really, really good months. But now I think you have to look at your starting pitchers and say, how can we get more out of them as far as being more economical and being more efficient? I don't have the answer to that question. I think if the Mets had the answer to that question, they would have figured it out already because it's costing their team dearly. But I think if we're going to identify two individuals in the rotation and say, hey, we need more length out of the two of you respectively, it's got to be Sean Manaea, who now is fully back from the injury. You know, we're not hearing about pitch count anymore. The training wheels are off for Sean Manaea. Then there's Kodai Senga. And this has been a big complaint of mine with Kodai Senga for this entire year. I know the numbers are pretty good. I need more length out of you, big boy. I do. I can't have you out of these games in 4 2/3 and 5 innings. I don't care if you're only giving up a run. You got to go and be the man. You know, Quay Holmes, I know the situation. I know he hasn't started games before. You can't expect him to be a guy that's going 7 innings or 6 innings consistently. Those two big guys at the top of the rotation, joining David Peterson, gotta give me more length. So I don't know if that's Hefner. I don't know if that's, hey, the pitching lab. I look at the arms. Hey, fellas, you're throwing a baseball. Go deeper into the ball games. Let's go.
Do you think, Pat, does it have anything to do with the injuries that maybe they're not fully healthy, or is it something more with especially those two guys?
Yeah, obviously both those guys missed a lot of time, talking about Manaea and Senga. So, but at this point, they're pretty much built back up. Like JJ said, the training wheels are off. These guys have reached a full threshold of pitch counts. They expect them to go 90, 95. And if a guy throws 95 pitches, ideally that's 6 or 7 innings. It's not sustainable to ask your bullpen to get 15 outs every single game. No matter how much of a power pen you build, it's just not possible because they're not going to be perfect every single night. That's not realistic to ask these guys. They're going to give up runs every once in a while. So if you're asking 3 guys to hold the lead, yeah, that's possible. When you're asking 5 guys to hold the lead, there's a better chance that one of them is going to give it up. So it comes down to somebody outside of David Peterson is going to have to start giving the Mets a little bit of length because it's not a reasonable expectation even for Peterson to expect him to go 7 innings every single time because he's going to have starts where he doesn't. And that's okay because he's earned that because of how he's thrown the ball. So the Mets need guys like Manaea and Senga to be able to go deeper into games. They know that. Sean said it yesterday that he knows he has to be better. And we can't just see flashes of it for 3-4 innings. We have to see them be able to put it together for 5, gut their way through 6, or give them 6 and figure out a way to get through 7 and give these bullpen arms a little bit of leeway. So that way in October, when maybe it is set up to do a 5 and fly start, these guys are rested and ready to go to have success. So it's going to have to start because the pitching at some point is going to have to step up and carry this team.
Yeah, this starting rotation is not. Maybe they'll get you into the playoffs by the skin of your nose, but they're not going to get you far in the playoffs. The super pen was supposed to be the answer to all these problems. The starting pitcher will start to make its length, and then the super pen will carry things all the way to the end. But it's not really living up to the expectations. Ryan Helsley, 5 runs in his 5 appearances since joining the team. Tyler Rogers was pitching well. Then he did receive the loss against the Guardians. Those two haven't really given the spark they were expected to. JJ, what are your thoughts on the trade deadline acquisitions? And do you think now at this point Stearns is kicking himself for not getting a starting pitcher?
Well, listen, I think a whole lot of teams, Niki, wanted to get starting pitchers. I think the Mets are in that camp. I think the Yankees were in that camp. I think there are a lot of teams that wanted to go and add to their rotations. The cost was just way too high for these teams. And when I look at that around the sport, it's tough for me to kill, let's say, David Stearns individually because look at the other GMs. They found themselves in the exact same predicament, and they couldn't land the starter. So I'll give him a pass for that, number one. As far as these guys out of the bullpen, look, it's still too early to tell. For me to look at Helsley and to look at Rogers and to say, oh, these guys aren't going to pan out. They're not going to be able to handle New York. They're not going to be able to make this the super pen. Let's see how it shakes out over the final 2 months because I don't care how efficient and how effective Helsley and Rogers might have been for San Francisco and St. Louis. It's a different animal when you're pitching in New York City. It just is. Like, we've seen so many talented guys. We're watching it on the other side of town with Devin Williams, who is a super talented reliever, and I think is clearly a little bit spooked by what's going on pitching in the 9th inning and pitching for the New York Yankees. So that's an adjustment period. I do like the fact that neither one of those guys is necessarily pitching in the 9th inning. So you're kind of taking that burden of pressure off of them.